Hi, Epic Recaps here, and today I am going to explain to you a 2021 action-adventure titled, The Kingsman. If you want to be spoiled, keep watching. The movie begins and it's the year 1902 in South Africa. A man named Orlando, the Duke of Oxford, travels with his family and their bodyguard Shola, to a concentration camp to meet with General Kitchener to drop off supplies. Orlando is troubled by how the occupants are caged up and expresses his displeasure. Outside, his wife Emily, who is working at the Red Cross with her husband, reminds her son Conrad, the tale of King Arthur and his round table, explaining the importance of treating others equally, no matter how privileged one may be. When Emily approaches the gate, a sniper opens fire at the nearby soldiers and she runs to Conrad, but is shot in the abdomen just before Shola finds the assassin and kills him. Orlando stays by Emily's side as she dies, and Conrad runs to his mother. The scene jumps to 12 years later. Orlando and Conrad arrive back home to their estate and are greeted by their household servants and trusted bodyguard. Inside, Orlando and the nanny, Polly Watkins, go back and forth about his overly protective parenting style, after she discovers that Conrad received an invitation to visit his cousin Felix in Russia, but Orlando declined it. Meanwhile, Conrad trains in combat with Shola and the young man manages to hold his own. Out of nowhere, a gunshot is heard and Polly appears, telling them to clean up for their appointment. Later that afternoon, father and son arrive at Kingsman tailor shop to fit Conrad for his first suit. Inside the fitting room, when Conrad mentions he wouldn't mind a shooting suit as well, hinting at the lack of excitement in his life, Orlando reminds him that they are Oxfords and not rogues. Afterward, Orlando bumps into Kitchener, who requires a favor and asks him to accompany the Archduke of Austria through Sarajevo, as his political ambitions have put him in danger. Outside, a friendly Morton offers Conrad his help after hearing his desire to join the army. Reappearing, Orlando tells Conrad he's going to need a shooting suit after all, and the young man is delighted. At a secret location, the mad monk Grigory Rasputin arrives to join several other nefarious tyrants, including Gavrilo Princip, Eric Jan Hanussen, Mata Hari, and Alfred Dupont. They are met by their leader, a hidden villain who calls himself the Shepherd. He assigns the loyal members rings with different animal icons and a hidden cyanide pill. He tells his goons that his mole in the British government has informed him of Kitchener's concern for the Archduke's safety and instructs Princip to prove the general's concerns are justified. Some time passes and Princip is putting his finishing touches on a bomb. Opening his window, he sees the approaching parade, led by the Archduke and his wife Sophie, with Orlando and Conrad by their side. Princip throws the bomb at the car, but Conrad deflects it with an umbrella, hitting the car behind them, and they manage to escape, unharmed. A while later, Princip is sitting at a nearby cafe preparing to commit suicide over his failure when he sees the Archduke's car driving toward a dead end. Princip seizes the opportunity and shoots the Archduke and his wife, killing them both before he is arrested. In the aftermath, Orlando shares his worries that the world will soon be in conflict. When Conrad states nobody cares about Serbia, Orlando tells him small troubles can quickly turn into big ones, and tells a tale of three cousins, King George V, Kaiser Wilhelm II, and Tsar Nicholas II, who are now the respective rulers of England, Germany, and Russia. The three have always been rivals, only kept in line by their grandmother Queen Victoria, and the assassination of the Archduke will only give the Kaiser more reason to reignite their feud. Back in Britain, King George sends off letters to his cousins, reminding them of duty, and suggests they refrain from any action that could cause further friction. Meanwhile, in Germany, Hanussen acts as an advisor to the Kaiser and reminds him of the torment he had to endure at the hands of his cousins. Elsewhere in Russia, the Tsar shares that although King George means to keep the peace, the Tsar refuses to break his promise to Serbia and will give Kaiser's ego a downsizing to match his deformed hand, much to the delight of Rasputin, a close family advisor. The impending World War I has broken out, devastating Europe for 2 years with millions of lives lost and resources depleted. The Shepherd celebrates his victory and now plans to have Russia pull out of the war, leaving Germany to direct their entire force towards England, revealing his ultimate plan to crush the English for their oppression of Scotland. Later in his office, Conrad barges in with a conscription poster and expresses his desire to join the fight. When Orlando shuts him down and tells him that one does not fight in a war, rather they die in it, he storms out in frustration. At home, Orlando approaches his son and sympathizes with the young man. He shares that he too was eager to fight for honor, but began to question how he could kill another, whose only crime was defending their own country, and decided to drop his rifle and pick up a stretcher for the Red Cross instead. Orlando reveals that he's instructed Kitchener of his desires and will not let Conrad sign up, leaving the young man devastated. Back in Russia, Rasputin manipulates Nicholas and his wife by slipping their son Alexei a candy laced with poison. Using his holy powers, he convinces the royal couple that the prince represents the soul of Russia, and to save him, the Tsar must save the country by pulling out of the war. Felix Yusupov, Conrad's cousin, watches from above as Rasputin fills the couple's ears with words that incite fear and keeps them under his spell with opium. He writes a letter to Conrad, appealing to Orlando's connections to prevent the Tsar from making a catastrophic mistake. Conrad arrives at Kitchener's with his cousin's letter, and Morton suggests the situation is dire and that they assemble an elite team and go to Russia to sort things out in person. When Conrad pleads to go join them, Orlando suddenly appears and orders him home. Kitchener and his men set off for Russia, and on his ship, he expresses sorrow for the countless deaths. Meanwhile, a nearby enemy submarine launches a missile and destroys Kitchener's ship, killing everyone on board. News of the general's death reaches Orlando, who receives a letter Kitchener wrote before his death, in which he expressed regret for their last encounter, and believes Conrad a fine man who is ready to face the world. Respecting his friend's wishes, he will do everything to keep Conrad out of harm's way. When he's finished the letter, an angry Conrad, who's been arguing his desire to do something, anything to help, slams his hand and accuses his father of sheltering him because he couldn't save Emily. Inspired by his friend's words, Orlando brings Conrad to meet with Polly and Shola in their secret headquarters, where they plan to take matters into their own hands. He tells them that he visited Princip in his prison cell and stopped 2 guards from hanging him by fighting them off and then getting information out of Princip. He knows of the villain's organization, and they plan to target Rasputin and kill him before his influence makes matters worse. Orlando also explains to Conrad that he is a pacifist because although he was a skilled killer, he felt that killing took away too much of his soul. The team travels to Russia, with the plan to get Conrad to play into Rasputin's fondness for young men, before tricking him into eating a poisoned Bakewell tart as the monk suffered from a sweet tooth. Orlando and Conrad infiltrate a dinner held by Rasputin, but he finds Conrad boring and directs his interest toward Orlando. Bringing Orlando into his chambers after he claims he can heal his injured leg, Rasputin performs a bizarre holy ritual and licks the wound. Stopping to stuff his face with half of the cake, he continues to work on the wound, taking pleasure in Orlando's discomfort. When Rasputin suddenly vomits the cake out, he tells Orlando that the cake did not agree with him. Guiding Orlando outside to the frozen lake to dip his leg in, he reveals he knew that the cake was laced with cyanide because he takes poison every morning to develop an immunity to it. When he attempts to drown Orlando, Conrad and Shola barge in, and the bodyguard goes after Rasputin. Shola and Rasputin engage in combat, reminiscent of a Russian ballet, while Conrad rushes to Orlando's side. When Rasputin appears to have Shola at his mercy, Orlando encourages his son to shoot the enemy, but only manages to knock his sword out of his hands. Coming to Conrad's rescue, the 3 engage in a sword fight, and after Orlando delivers the killing thrust, he drags him to the lake to drown him. Rasputin rises for one more kill attempt, but Polly appears with her gun and shoots him in the head, finally killing him. The team returns home on the train and celebrates Conrad's birthday, but the happy occasion is short-lived when Orlando realizes his son is now of age to fight in the war. Returning to England, Conrad enlists in the army and Orlando is powerless to stop him. Back in Germany and on the shepherd's orders, Hanussen convinces Wilhelm to send a telegram to convince Mexico to invade America, hoping to distract them from joining forces with Britain. As the war rages on, Conrad is engaged in rigorous training and is finally ready to head to the front to defend his country. Meanwhile, Polly manages to intercept a message from Wilhelm's Secretary of State, Zimmerman, and Orlando is hopeful that once President Wilson sees the telegram, he'll have no choice but to join Britain, which will result in the ending of the war. At the White House, President Wilson is informed of Germany's back dealings, but he dismisses it, requiring more concrete evidence to get involved in the war. At Army headquarters, Conrad is informed that he's being sent back to the London office at Orlando's request. Determined to join his comrades in battle, he switches places with a soldier named Archie Reed, and takes his place on the front lines. Meanwhile, Archie arrives at the Oxford estate and announces himself as Lancelot, requiring an audience with King Arthur. The young officer hands Orlando a message from Conrad, who informs him that he is finally fulfilling his dream and asks him not to punish Archie. At the front lines, Conrad, who's replaced Archie as a member of the Black Watch, joins his comrades in combat against the German army. When a spy for the British Army is wounded in no man's land, the team is recruited to recover the intelligence he is carrying. Later that night, Conrad, along with 5 other soldiers, quietly make their way across the battlefield. When Conrad comes face to face with a German soldier, he hesitates before taking his first life. Alerted by the commotion, the Germans begin opening fire and Conrad witnesses his comrades fall one by one. Alone in no man's land, he runs for cover and lands in a trench where he begins to break down in tears. A voice interrupts him and he discovers the wounded spy, who offers Conrad solace and comfort when he laments that he never got to say goodbye to his father. The spy instructs Conrad to return to the base with the intelligence that could end the war, but the young soldier refuses to leave him behind and ends up carrying him back at sunrise. Amidst gunfire, they run across the battlefield and almost make it before an explosion kills the spy and throws Conrad into the barracks. He delivers the item he retrieved, and when he identifies himself as Archie, a friend of Archie's calls him a liar and accusing him of being a German spy, he shoots Conrad in the head and kills him. Back home, Orlando is devastated when he is informed of his son's death. Orlando is unable to cope in the aftermath and falls into a depression and begins drinking. At the same time, the Tsar, who's been battling a revolution, declares his abdication in Russia. Elsewhere, Hanusan and Hari arrive to inform their leader that President Wilson will be receiving the telegram shortly and inevitably enter the war. The shepherd sends Hari to the United States to shake things up and get the president under their thumb. One afternoon, King George arrives with news that the information Conrad recovered was the written proof President Wilson required and hands Orlando the Victorian Cross medal that's been awarded to Conrad. After he leaves, Polly lashes out and challenges Orlando to be the man Conrad wanted to be, but no longer can. Giving him a kiss, she resigns her post and is about to leave when he tells her he will not accept her resignation, but will accept a strong cup of tea. Back to his normal self, Polly informs Orlando that their network in the White House reports that since President Wilson received the telegram, he's been holding secret meetings and ignoring all advice to enter the war. Suggesting an unannounced visit, Orlando and his team travel to the United States, and when he drops in at the embassy he discovers a scarf that feels all too familiar. When he sees Hari leaving the ambassador's office, the two engage in a struggle, and Orlando manages to subdue her. After a sit-down with the official, Orlando learns that Hari seduced the president and is blackmailing him with a recording to keep the US out of the war. Orlando instructs him to interrogate Hari while he follows up with a lead. Back at the Kingsman tailor, the man tells the pair that the cashmere used to make the scarf comes from a unique coat that can only be found on a particular mountaintop. The trio arrives to scope it out and make plans to attack. At dawn, Orlando commands his own plane and preparing to jump, he gets knocked off and is stuck in the wing. When the plane begins to hurtle toward the ground, Orlando manages to deploy his parachute, but he gets stuck midway at the bottom of a cliff. Managing to climb up using knives, he almost gets knocked over by the shepherd's goat, but is able to grab onto its horn and pulls himself up, gently petting him in thanks. Outside the barn, he overhears the shepherd questioning DuPont about Hari's whereabouts as she is nowhere to be found. He sends DuPont to the press with Hari's recording in hopes of getting President Wilson to resign. A goon discovers Orlando, who runs into the barn for cover, unaware that a large henchman is operating an elevator shaft inside. Orlando fights the brute, while Polly provides Shola cover. He jumps on the counterweight and she shoots it loose, sending him to the top to save Orlando and at the same time, sending DuPont, who was on the elevator, to his death. Calling Polly, who is at the base of the mountain, she confirms that she has the recording and the men make their way to confront the shepherd. Unable to believe his plans have been thwarted by a peace-loving Englishman, The two sides exchange fire, and when Orlando gets him to step out, the shepherd reveals his identity and turns out to be Morton, Kitchener's assistant. Morton prepares to shoot Orlando when Shola shields him and takes a bullet. The two men engage in an intense sword fight, and after Morton disarms a grenade, the two continue their battle by the edge of the cliff. About to deliver the killing blow, Morton is stabbed by one of his own goats, and Orlando turns the tables, holding Morton over the edge with the scarf. When Morton doesn't believe Orlando has what it takes to kill him, he is proven wrong, and Orlando tells him he's finally the man his son wanted to be and cuts the scarf with Conrad's Victorian cross. Afterward, Orlando has the incriminating video sent to President Wilson, who burns it and finally steps into the war, resulting in the end of World War I. King George shares that the Kaiser abdicated his position, and the Tsar and his whole family were murdered. Expressing his gratitude to Orlando, he agrees to return the favor in the near future. 2 years following the end of the war, Orlando informs the gathered group that he's purchased the tailor shop as a front for his organization, free of government bureaucracy. In honor of Conrad's memory, Orlando gives the team code names based on the Knights of the Round Table, thus, the Kingsman Agency is born. Elsewhere, Hanussen is revealed to have taken on the shepherd identity, and introduces Vladimir Lenin to the man who killed the Tsar and his family, a young Adolf Hitler. Let us know if you enjoyed this movie in the comments below. For more spy action thrillers, check out the next movie recap about a young American who finds himself in the middle of a global conspiracy.